to the spotlight, it got that much bigger and that much brighter on the WNBA. And I'm really glad that she mentions it here. It's just Caitlin Clark. It's always been just Caitlin Clark. Yes, there are other great young players who have come into this league, but it has truly been the Caitlin Clark.
So Rachel DeMita just released this breakdown, showing exactly how Caitlin Clark turned the WNBA from a struggling operation into a multi-billion-dollar media empire. She went through all the data, the contracts, and the cold hard evidence proving that one single player flipped everything upside down. No fluff, no politically correct nonsense, just the raw truth about who really rescued women's basketball and why certain people keep denying it. Here's what I want to know. Do you honestly believe the WNBA would have landed that massive $2.2 billion media contract without Caitlin Clark joining in 2024? Or was that money coming their way regardless? Drop your real thoughts below.
To talk about this ESPN article, and it's entitled WNBA CBA Negotiations at an Impasse, 11 Things That Got Us to This Point. And this was written by Alexa Filippo. She has been covering all things WNBA relentlessly, but I've seen a lot of discourse about a couple of things in this article. So I simply wanted to go over it with you guys.
Rachel DeMita just released her take on an ESPN piece by Alexa Filippo covering the WNBA's collective bargaining talks. And hidden within that timeline sits the harsh reality everyone's been tiptoeing around for 2 solid years. Caitlin Clark didn't just help the WNBA or contribute to its success. She flat out rescued it. Let's dive into the timeline DeMita presented, because these numbers are absolutely devastating for anyone still pushing the narrative that this was some kind of team effort or organic development.
Here. Well, it started in January 2020. The WNBA and the WNBPA agreed to a groundbreaking CBA. And they announced this on January 14th, 2020, that they had agreed to a groundbreaking and landmark collective bargaining agreement. Now, you see what the groundbreaking CBA was when Caitlin Clark is on a $70,000 per year deal. That at the time was groundbreaking for these players. So just to put that into perspective as the kind of money that they are talking about right now, average salaries around $500K to max salaries over $1 million. It was groundbreaking for them when a max salary was over $200,000. So
January 2000. Here we are in 2020. The WNBA and Players Association celebrated what they labeled a revolutionary and historic collective bargaining deal. Want to know what made it so revolutionary? Maximum contracts barely cracking $200,000. That was their definition of revolutionary in 2020. Paying elite athletes slightly more than someone pulling down a solid office salary. For context, when Caitlin Clark signed her rookie deal, she got $76,000 annually. That was the going rate under this so-called revolutionary agreement. Fast forward to today, and players are discussing average paychecks around $500,000, with max deals exceeding $1 million. Within 6 short years, the entire money game transformed completely. But here's what really matters. During most of those 6 years, the league was expanding steadily but slowly. The type of expansion that feels positive but doesn't actually revolutionize the business foundation or long-term viability.
In just 6 years. But I did want to point this out because prioritization, a new system requiring players to put the WNBA first ahead of overseas commitments, was also introduced. And this is something that I predict, maybe not this CBA, but probably the next one, if the salaries continue to rise, if they get that revenue split that they're asking for or something even close to that, it's going to be more than prioritization. It's going to be exclusivity.
DeMita highlighted that back in 2020, Unrivaled didn't exist. Athletes Unlimited wasn't around. Project B wasn't even a concept. Players were stuck grinding overseas, then returning for WNBA seasons, dealing with awful travel situations and holding practices at commercial fitness centers because franchises lacked proper training facilities. The 2020 bubble season was absolutely disastrous compared to what the NBA pulled off. The living situations were rough. The meal arrangements were questionable, and clips went viral, showing the massive divide between NBA and WNBA player treatment. That situation sparked friction between players and Commissioner Cathy Engelbert that would bubble up again down the road. Jump ahead to February 2022. The WNBA announced they'd raised $75 million through new investors. This is where things get messy, and where DeMita acknowledges she probably came down too hard on Cathy Engelbert previously.
2022. So this was when the capital raise was announced. A capital raise featuring new investors and existing WNBA and NBA owners brought in $75 million that was used to supercharge the WNBA's business growth, including better marketing and more innovation. And this is when we talk about the split, you guys, and why it's very hard for players to get more of a revenue share than what they're asking for. 42% of the WNBA is owned by the WNBA, 42% is owned by the NBA.
Check out how ownership split after that funding round. The WNBA held 42%, the NBA controlled 42%, an investment group grabbed the remaining 16%. That 16% slice Engelbert sold off has created drama because it makes revenue-sharing talks way more complex now. Players want a bigger cut of everything, but that pie gets divided between way more parties than just the WNBA and its athletes.
This capital raise might have been exactly what the W needed at the time.
Here's what DeMita figured out looking back, though. The WNBA was in rough shape during 2022. That cash injection might have been essential just to survive. Without that money flowing in for improved marketing and new initiatives, would teams have gone under? Would the entire league have been forced to shrink?
The NBA, and I think that that's an okay thing. Like, we should be able to say this aloud, because if now they don't need the NBA, or in the next 5 years they won't need the NBA, then you have this runway to try to
DeMita raises a solid point here. It's simple to trash decisions when you're looking backward, and the league is crushing it. But during that moment, Engelbert could have been making the hard choices, required to keep the WNBA breathing long enough to capitalize on what nobody saw coming. And what nobody saw coming was Caitlin Clark. April 2024 hits. Caitlin Clark gets drafted into the WNBA, and the entire universe flips overnight. Not slowly, not across multiple seasons. Instantly. DeMita nails it with this comparison. The attention on the WNBA jumped from a weak laser pointer to one of those massive helicopter spotlights police use for manhunts. That's how crazy the transformation was.
It got that much bigger and that much brighter on the WNBA, and I'm really glad that she mentions it here. It's just Caitlin Clark. It's always been just Caitlin Clark. Yes, there are other great young players who have come into this league, but it has truly been the Caitlin Clark effect. Even if you look at the viewership for Iowa this year, the viewership for Iowa in the past couple years, even after Caitlin Clark departed, there are still people that are tuned into Iowa when Iowa was never at the top of the viewership numbers. It's because of Caitlin Clark. When she came into the league, the Indiana Fever were third last in attendance. And then when Caitlin Clark came into the league, they're immediately number one in attendance for the next 2 seasons.
Let's examine the real data, because this is where the argument that Caitlin Clark rescued the WNBA becomes impossible to dispute. The Indiana Fever sat third from the bottom in attendance before Clark showed up. The season she got drafted, they instantly shot to first place in attendance and stayed there. That's not gradual improvement. That's an earthquake, caused entirely by one individual. Now look at Angelers for comparison. The Chicago Sky actually ranked in the top 3 for attendance the season before Reese arrived. After she joined them, they plummeted to the bottom 5 in attendance. That's not disrespecting Reese as an athlete. She's skilled and has supporters. But her arrival didn't translate into more ticket sales and packed arenas. DeMita notes that even Iowa's TV ratings stayed strong after Clark moved on to the WNBA. Fans who discovered Iowa basketball because of Clark continued watching after she left. That shows someone who built genuine new interest instead of just moving existing fans around. The 2024 WNBA season shattered records for attendance, viewership, and every major measurement. The WNBA Championship Series between Liberty and Lynx drew the biggest audience in 25 years. And sure, both teams played incredible basketball, but let's be real about why casual viewers were tuning into the WNBA that season. Caitlin Clark. DeMita stresses that the WNBA was expanding steadily from 2020 to 2024. But it was baby steps, the kind that creeps up gradually over time. Then Clark entered and the chart went straight up. That's not natural expansion. That's one person completely altering where an entire league was headed. And the money proves it beyond question. July 2024 arrived. The WNBA locks down an 11-year media rights package worth $2.2 billion or $200 million annually, with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC Universal. That contract got hammered out and signed just months after Caitlin Clark was drafted. Anyone think that timing is random? Media executives were watching viewership explode throughout Clark's first season. They witnessed sold-out venues. They saw social media buzz go through the roof. They watched casual sports fans suddenly get invested in women's basketball. So they cut a $2.2 billion check because they believed those metrics would stick around. They believed Caitlin Clark had permanently shifted how much WNBA content was actually worth. Without that media contract, today's collective bargaining talks would be totally different. Players couldn't demand revenue sharing and huge pay bumps because there wouldn't be enough money to share. The financial base that makes those requests even slightly realistic only exists because of the media rights package, which only exists because of Caitlin Clark. DeMita brings up some fascinating possibilities about prioritization policies, and maybe even exclusivity requirements, moving forward. Currently, WNBA players can compete overseas during the off-season, but prioritization rules mean they have to choose the WNBA first, if schedules clash. If paychecks keep climbing, if players get anywhere near the revenue percentage they're pushing for, DeMita thinks the next collective bargaining agreement might ban overseas play completely. Similar to how NBA players generally stick to the NBA exclusively. That only functions if WNBA money gets high enough that players don't need international income to survive. And those big paychecks only happen if revenue keeps growing. And revenue growth depends entirely on keeping and expanding the fan base that Caitlin Clark built. Notice how everything leads back to one athlete. DeMita also mentions the facilities arms race that kicked off in April 2023 when Las Vegas Aces revealed their 64,000 square foot practice complex. Before 2023, teams were literally working out at YMCAs and regular gyms. Now it's become a contest to see who can construct the most advanced training center. The Indiana Fever's upcoming facility will reportedly cost $100 million. Chicago Sky and Dallas Wings are building new complexes. These investments are happening because owners finally believe the WNBA is a profitable venture worth serious money, and they believe that because of the audience explosion driven by Caitlin Clark. DeMita touches on the conflict between players and Cathy Engelbert that blew up right before the 2024 championship. Nafisa Collier went public criticizing Engelbert's leadership, which pulled some focus away from the finals. And here's where DeMita makes another excellent observation. The WNBA has to stay focused on delivering amazing basketball. All the contract negotiations and media buzz and league politics won't matter if the actual games aren't exciting enough to keep new fans hooked. She points out that the 2025 All-Star Game was off. Players wore "Pay Us What You Owe Us" shirts, then delivered a worse show than even the famously terrible NBA All-Star Game. That's not how you maintain a growing audience. That's how you make casual fans lose interest and go back to ignoring women's basketball. The truth is, these players won't be around forever. Caitlin Clark will eventually retire. If the WNBA hasn't created a consistently entertaining product by then, the audience she delivered will vanish just as fast as it appeared. DeMita also discusses Unrivaled and how its ratings problems expose the reality about who actually brings viewers. When Caitlin Clark plays casual golf, that pulls better numbers than Unrivaled games. That's not hyperbole, it's trackable fact. Paige Bueckers was supposed to be the next phenomenon, the next athlete who could generate massive attention, but her Unrivaled appearances aren't pulling anywhere near the audience people predicted. Meanwhile, anything Caitlin Clark does, seriously anything at all, creates huge engagement. That's not meant to trash other players' abilities. Angel Reese is talented. Paige Bueckers is talented. But talented player and game-changing cultural force are completely different categories. The WNBA has plenty of talented players. It has exactly one Caitlin Clark. The difficult reality some people still won't acknowledge is that individual players can transform entire leagues. It happened when Magic Johnson and Larry Bird rescued the NBA during the night. It happened when Tiger Woods revolutionized golf. It happened when Serena Williams elevated women's tennis. And it happened when Caitlin Clark saved the WNBA.
DeMita earns respect for examining the timeline honestly and acknowledging where she might have misjudged Cathy Engelbert's choices. She also earns respect for simply saying what's obvious. Caitlin Clark rescued the WNBA, and pretending walk-ins means ignoring reality. The players hammering out the current collective bargaining agreement have power they've never possessed before. They're demanding salaries and revenue cuts that would have been ridiculous 5 years ago. They have that power because of the media rights contract. They have that media rights contract because of exploding viewership. They have exploding viewership because of Caitlin Clark. It really breaks down that simply, so that's the breakdown. Rachel DeMita laid out the undeniable timeline showing Caitlin Clark saved the WNBA. And these numbers tell the whole story. If you want more straight talk about women's basketball without the sugarcoating, hit that like button and subscribe for all the latest analysis. What's your take? Can the WNBA keep this momentum going after Caitlin Clark eventually hangs it up? Or does everything fall apart?